Today, we need to talk about Seth. He's one of the newest supportive / defensive characters added to the game, and he has some serious potential. He performs amazingly with anomaly characters, has decent days for a non-stun character, and also has a kit that maybe suggests he could even be a damage dealer, but we'll get into that later. Before I continue, I do want to mention that this is a first impressions review and Seth, and we are on the creator experience server, so therefore things can change. And fun fact, there actually has been a documented change to Seth, which I'll be going over later. Let's get into it. At first glance, Seth is heavily focused on his role as a buffer, since he has his shield and anomaly proficiency buff. This is honestly more than enough reason already to take him in any anomaly focused team, but there's actually something even better. If Seth is paired with another electric character or someone from his faction, he reduces anomaly buildup resistance for all attributes by 20% for 20 seconds. Now of course, the anomaly proficiency he provides is a massive buff for anomaly characters, but most of these characters also focus on trying to fill the anomaly bar quickly. This is also not a buff that affects one person, and rather it affects every person on Seth's team. This is huge. With that out of the way, let's talk about Seth's core passive. This is a lot of reading to do, so long story short, Seth himself gains a decent sized shield when he uses his EX special attack, and when he uses his charge attack, his assist follow-up, or a chain attack to swap to another character, the swapped character then gains the same shield. The reason this shield is so impactful is because it also comes with a 100 anomaly proficiency increase, which is a massive damage increase for anomaly characters in general. Let's now move along to his basic attacks. Truthfully, the generic 4 basic attack combo should almost never be used at all. They have basically no purpose whatsoever, and the more important skill within the basic attack kit section is his lightning strike electrified. This is Seth's held charge attack, and it's actually pretty good. Seth launches several attacks in front of him that deal decent electric damage, and at the end he is granted a quick assist. Using this will swap him off to the squad member before him, and this is where his supportive features shine. The shield we mentioned earlier can be given to allies anytime Seth casts this charge attack, and this is one of the best, quickest ways to buff your allies. Now the main reason players would not be able to spam this attack over and over is because of his resource gauge. In order to activate the lightning strike attack, Seth needs 75% of his resource bar filled so he can use it. There are several ways for Seth to generate this resource, and this is the following. He gains 25% when using a defensive assist, 75% when performing a chain attack, 75% again when he uses his ultimate, and 75% again when he uses his EX special attack. Based on this, his energy regen is super important since you are less likely to be able to cast chain attacks, and you would otherwise need to do 3 defensive assists before you would be able to use his charge attack. Therefore, his special attack and having enough energy regen to use it is critical for Seth's game plan. Now to be clear, Seth's special attack is great not only because it generates resolve, it also deals pretty good damage and dazes decently too. This is what most of your time on Seth will be spent doing, since you need the damage, the daze, and the energy regen from Seth's EX special to make his gameplay worthwhile. On a side note, although most supportive or low investment Seth builds will simply focus on his EX special to receive the 75% resolve, this attack does scale decently well with damage too, assuming you either hold it down or have decent attack and crit damage in his build. In regard to Seth's assist and dodge, they both perform decently and similar to other melee agents' assists and dodges, but keep in mind that after using either an assist follow-up or a dodge counter, Seth can activate his EX special and perform a faster thunder shield rush, which is way better than having to hold down this attack for longer. The damage on these attacks are pretty decent, but what's even more notable here is that these attacks have decent daze multipliers on them. Seth of course is a defense character, but his role as a daze applier is actually pretty noticeable. We'll have to see in the future how relevant this ends up being, but current pairings of Seth and Jane suggest that assault and Seth's dazing alone can still be insane by themselves. Similar to his assist and dodge, Seth's chain and ultimate are good, all things considered. His ultimate is pretty much just a big burst of damage, but keep in mind that it also provides 75% resolve and 3 additional assist points. This is honestly not nearly as impactful as using the ultimate of a support character or even a damage dealer's, but DPS based Seth builds will definitely appreciate this. Now we do have to talk about the chain attack nerf, and although the chain does do decent damage in daze, it is worth mentioning that the anomaly buildup nerf is pretty significant if you were relying on that specifically. The rate at which it stacks is noticeably changed, and this again has 2 potential outcomes. The first interpretation you can have from this is that anomaly based Seth has definitely been nerfed, but I also believe that those looking to build Seth more crit damage / attack focused, or if you don't want Seth to apply anomaly whatsoever, may have been buffed. If you pair a stunner like Chang'e or even a defense focused character like Seth alongside a disorder team composition, they may actually end up applying too much anomaly, and this can be a problem if you don't have anomaly proficiency in their build. However, with this change, Seth will still be able to perform high damage numbers while not applying nearly as much anomaly and affecting the disorder team. Ultimately, I still feel that this will negatively impact Seth's experience since most players are trying to build him on anomaly proficiency, but if you aren't looking too deeply into it, this is probably not that big of a change at all. The final part of Seth's kit I'd like to go over however, is his additional ability, since it does play a huge part as to why he's strong. When Seth is paired with someone of his same attribute or faction, he gains the ability to reduce a target's anomaly buildup resistance by 20% for 20 seconds after he uses his charge attack. Now this is going to have a nearly 100% uptime since he constantly uses his charge attack and because it lasts 20 seconds, but this is why his pairing alongside characters like Jane or Grace is amazing. These agents already rely heavily on attribute anomaly and disorder to do a majority of their damage, and this is basically just a better version of Freedom Blue's 4-piece set effect. This is insane value. On the topic of Freedom Blues and stats, let's now talk build. There are a few different options that are available, but here are my recommendations. 4-piece Freedom Blues, 4-piece Shockstar Disco if you want to use him as a stunner, and 4-piece Swing Jazz are your best options. If you are playing Seth as a damage dealer, 4-piece Thunder Metal, Woodpecker, or Puffer Electro is also a solid option, but these are definitely more niche. Despite the options here for supports, keep in mind that Swing Jazz will definitely be one of your top choices because of the way that Freedom Blue works, and given that only one set of Freedom Blues per team is ideal, it can work well on Seth. It's better used on Seth's teammates like Grace, since agents like Grace don't have a better set to use. If you aren't using Grace in your lineup, however, making sure to have the set effect on someone is definitely a good idea, and Seth can take that role for sure. For 2-piece disk drive options, Seth can choose between Swing Jazz or Freedom Blues depending on which is selected as the 4-piece set. Not having Swing Jazz on Seth sounds like a bad idea, since he is definitely reliant on energy to get his quick assist. For damage dealer Seth, the same can be said regarding his options. Woodpecker is definitely a fantastic 2-set option, however Puffer and Thunder are equally as good. So at the end of the day, regardless if you're using Seth as a damage dealer or as a support, the set with the better rolls on it will win, and that's the one you should use. No surprises here. Regarding main stats on his disk drive, Seth has a few options here. I found energy regen to be irreplaceable, especially on the 6th slot, considering how reliant Seth is on his EX special, but aside from this, there is actually a lot of flexibility to his choices. Seth's 5th disk drive can be electric damage, attack percent, or even pen, and then there's the biggest question of all, his 4th slot disk drive. This is what will actually define your Seth's build. If Seth has a 4th slot anomaly disk drive, you can build Seth as an additional anomaly applier who deals decent damage whenever he applies shock, and if you build him on crit rate, you can alternatively play Seth like a stunner or Dazer who builds crit rate and crit damage as a sub DPS. Attack percent can also be an option in the slot considering the scaling of his shield, but this isn't even addressing one of his most interesting builds of all. What if you have his 6th Mindscape and run a crit damage main 4th slot instead? The options are endless and his builds are versatile enough to fit in many different team compositions, but energy regen regardless of build definitely feels mandatory considering how often you use it. To complement this for substats, an anomaly based Seth will definitely want anomaly proficiency and attack percent, and for a crit stunner or DPS focused Seth, crit rate and crit damage alongside attack percent will be your goal. The final variation of Seth's build is if you are looking to take advantage of his 6th Mindscape, and it's just an all attack percent and crit damage focused build, but I'm starting to think this one might just be for me to test in a video later. Now onto his W engine choices. Peacekeeper Specialized is his signature, and it's one of the best choices simply because it has attack percent on it. Now of course this does mean that Spring Embrace is also viable for Seth's W engine choice, but both of these will perform similarly if they give energy. Peacekeeper definitely does pull out ahead if you are focused on Seth as an anomaly applier, but in general, both having energy regen and simply having attack percent as opposed to HP or defense makes them way better than any of his other options. Let's talk team compositions. This is where things become a bit more strict because of Seth's kit leaning towards being an anomaly based buffer slash debuffer, but this changes of course if you use him as a budget stunner or as a damage dealer. His best teams involve pairing him alongside Jane or Grace. This makes sense. The anomaly proficiency, the debuffing, perfect. Therefore, compositions like Jane, Grace, Seth, or Jane, Chingy, Seth are going to work amazingly. Of course, he is also usable as a buffer to any team that involves anomaly, including Piper or Nekomata compositions, but understand that these will definitely perform worse considering they have less synergies and less damage in most cases. Now if we address his potential as a stunner, this is where he actually fills a similar role to Ben. To start, teams like Anton Grace Seth, Anton Ambi Seth, or even Sokaku Ambi Seth can be nice depending on how desperate you are for free-to-play teams, but we need to talk. Truthfully, defense agents do not excel at any one particular role, and this is best showcased by Ben. Ben can give crit rate and shield to the team, but he also has decent value as a stunner. However, since he lacks an impact main defense W engine, he will always stun slower than the current roster of Dazers. This isn't to say that he still doesn't perform or he doesn't have value, however, it just means that he does it worse. In exchange for this, however, agents like Ben and Seth can be used for their buffing and in multiple roles depending on how you use them, since they can also stun at the same time. Long story short, although Ben can be used as a buffer to the team and also be used for stunning, he does not excel at either specifically. Seth is in a similar position since he does buff anomaly well and is fantastic along the anomaly cast, but his stun potential and usage with non-anomaly teams is definitely lacking compared to some other characters. Now, of course, he's fine as a stunner or buffer, but he's not great if there aren't any anomaly agents paired with him, so keep this in mind when you're choosing him for your team. Before I talk about Seth's damage dealing teams, let me be clear about this playstyle. Seth as a DPS does synergize with stunners, since he can be swapped in once the enemy is stunned and unload his big damage skills, but anytime he's not using his charge attack or attacking when an enemy is stunned, he is definitely lackluster. His basic attacks really do not do anything even if you build him as a damage dealer, so this is where having a stun team and having a burst window shines. Now that being said, his damage is definitely lackluster if you don't have M6, and even the numbers I'm about to show you are decent but not amazing. But being honest, the reason I even decided to test this DPS Seth viability was number one, because we don't really get that many characters as DPSs that are available if you are completely free to play, and number two, his 6th Mindscape really paints him out to be a potential DPS. Now that we've addressed the topic of DPS Seth's viability, however, here are my findings with teams. The DPS team compositions I'll be providing include Seth as a main damage dealer. This is highly experimental and definitely needs more testing once we get to live, but here's what I've had success with. Chingy definitely is his best partner, sorry Jane, if you want him to do damage. However, in general, having a stunner allows him to be off field and not suffer from having a weak basic attack. So the first team composition that I suggest is Seth, Chingy, and Nicole. Nicole is an absolute powerhouse currently for Shiyu defense, since most stages have several enemies that spawn at the start, and Nicole also allows you to clump enemies together for Chingy plus Seth to make quick work of them from a stun and burst combo. Now if you don't have Chingy, Ambi will work too, but remember that the increase in damage from Seth's Mindscape plus Chingy's stun damage increase is a good portion of the reason why this combo is strong. This final section and topic I'll be delving into is a bit unusual since Seth is an A rank, but it is worth asking. Should you pull for Seth? First and foremost, A ranks are definitely not worth pulling alone, since you ideally save up for limited S rank characters, but if you are interested in someone like Jane, getting Seth at the same time would definitely be helpful. Ultimately, Seth does present himself as someone who can be a damage dealer with enough mindscapes, and otherwise he's a terrific addition to any anomaly team. But with all this in mind, I do believe that pulling for Seth himself is not as appealing if you aren't pulling for Jane, but he does have plenty of reasons and strengths himself that would convince him to use him if you have him. I personally will be pulling for him, but you guys should spend responsibly and make your own financial choices. Thanks again for watching, guys. This was my first impressions on Seth. I do think he's quite strong, and even after testing him as a DPS, I do find him to be quite interesting, so we'll see what happens in the future. In any case, if you made it this far, thank you again for supporting and watching. I will see you guys on the next one. Make sure to check out the rest of my socials. Remember to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night, guys.